If I hadn't listened to my bull that afternoon, my daughter might not have come home. I used to laugh at talk about animals sensing things. But that day he stood in the field like a soldier at a gate, refusing to move, staring at me, then at the road, then back at me, as if he held a message in his chest and needed me to read it. I told myself it was nothing. I was wrong. I had spent the morning fixing a loose hinge on the barn door and checking the water lines. The air felt heavy like before a summer storm, but the sky stayed pale and still. My bull, Rocky, usually kept to the far fence. He was strong, stubborn, the kind that pushed his weight when he wanted room. That day he planted himself near the oak tree closest to the driveway and would not leave. When I called, he lifted his head, snorted, and tapped the ground once with a front hoof. "What's with you?" I asked. He looked from me to the lane again, slow and sure, like he had pointed at a sign only I couldn't see. I told myself he wanted feed, so I brought a bucket. He didn't touch it. He only nudged it away with his nose and stepped closer to me, chest out, breathing hard. "Rocky, quit," I said, forcing a laugh. He just kept that steady stare, turning it toward the bend of the road that led to our mailbox. "You're acting strange," I muttered. He flicked an ear, then he did something he never did. He let out a low, long sound, not angry, not wild, but heavy, like a warning that carried weight. From the porch, my wife called, "You hear from Sarah yet?" Our daughter had texted an hour earlier, picking up a part from town, back soon. "Not yet," I answered. I checked my phone. No bars. That wasn't unusual out here, but Rocky's eyes made it feel unusual anyway. I stepped toward the lane. He moved with me shoulder to shoulder as if he meant to walk me there. "You want me to look?" I asked him, half teasing. He swung his head once toward the curve, clear as a nod. My stomach tightened for no reason I could name. "All right," I told him. "I'll check." He exhaled like he'd been waiting for that sentence. Then I started down the drive and he followed. When I reached the end of the driveway, the world felt still in a way that made my skin prickle. The wind had stopped, yet the air was heavy and restless. I could hear the faint creak of tree branches in the distance, and somewhere far off, a low rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. Rocky stood beside me, his breath slow and deep, eyes locked on the bend of the road that disappeared between two tall sycamores. I called out, "Sarah," expecting her truck to appear around the turn any moment. Nothing. Only silence and that strange charged air that comes before something happens. I pulled my phone from my pocket. No signal. I frowned, trying to shake off the unease that was crawling up my spine. "She'll be here any second," I muttered, more to convince myself than him. But Rocky didn't move. He pawed the ground once, then let out a low, deep sound that sent a chill through me. It wasn't just noise, it was insistence. I took a few more steps down the road, gravel crunching under my boots. Rocky followed, his heavy frame moving with a kind of purpose that unsettled me. The sky darkened as a bank of clouds gathered fast from the west, swallowing the light. I squinted ahead, and that's when I saw something, just a flicker, a metallic glint in the ditch near the curve. I froze. "What's that?" I whispered, leaning forward. The shape was too still, too out of place. My heart started to pound. I jogged closer, the smell of wet earth filling the air as the wind began to rise again. The glint became clearer, the sun caught on broken glass. My chest tightened. "No," I broke into a run, shouting, "Sarah?" When I reached the ditch, I saw the truck. Her truck, angled nose first into the mud, front wheel twisted, hood crumpled against a fallen log. The windshield was shattered, a thin crack spidering across the glass. I yanked the door handle, it didn't budge. "Sarah?" My voice cracked. Then a faint sound answered, barely audible over the wind. "Dad?" She was there, her face pale, a trickle of blood at her temple. "I couldn't see," she whispered weakly. It came out of nowhere. "It's okay, sweetheart." "I'm here," I said, forcing calm into my voice though my hands trembled. I tugged at the door until the hinge gave, metal bending with a sharp groan. She tried to move but gasped. "My leg," she said, tears in her voice. I looked down, the dash had trapped her ankle. I tried to pull it free but the metal wouldn't move. The first drops of rain started to fall, slow, heavy, like warnings. Behind me, Rocky bellowed, his sound echoing through the trees, not frightened but fierce, urgent. I turned to him, he wasn't looking at us anymore. He was facing the open sky, his stance rigid, head high. Then I saw it too, the dark cloud twisting far beyond the fields, moving low and fast. It wasn't just a storm. It was something worse. The sky folded into itself as if the air had turned alive. The clouds twisted, the wind hissed through the fence lines, and in the distance a roar began to rise, deep and steady like a train that had lost its tracks. I knew that sound. Every farmer in Oklahoma knew it. My stomach dropped. Sarah, listen to me, I said, gripping her hand. We have to get you out. Now. She winced, trying to move her leg. I can't, Dad, it's stuck. Her voice broke, half sob, half panic. I braced both arms under the edge of the dashboard and pulled with everything I had. Metal screeched, bending just enough for her to slide free. She gasped, pain flashing across her face. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, feeling her tremble. We're okay, I lied. We just need to move fast. Rocky was pacing near the edge of the road, his head low, tail flicking wildly. The first blast of wind hit us, hard enough to sting my eyes. Dust and leaves whipped around us. He turned toward me and bellowed again, a sound I'll never forget, raw, demanding. I know. I shouted back like he could understand me. We're going. We started toward the house. The wind fought us every step, tearing at our clothes, dragging Sarah's hair across her face. Her limp slowed us down. Behind us came a crack, wood snapping, maybe a tree falling. Don't look back, I said. Just keep moving. Then, through the howl of wind, I heard something different, a new sound, closer, sharper. I turned and saw Rocky running full speed down the road toward us. For a heartbeat I thought he'd lost control, but he skidded to a stop in front of us, planting himself between us and the storm. His massive body blocked the flying debris that had begun to whip across the ground. Sarah clung to me. He's going to get hurt, she cried. He's protecting us, I said, not sure how I knew but certain it was true. Rocky stamped the ground twice, then swung his head toward the barn, the direction of the storm shelter. You're telling us where to go, I whispered. He did it again, loud and clear this time, then faced the wind as if daring it closer. I tightened my hold on Sarah and started toward the barn. Rocky moved beside us, his body steady even as branches flew past. The world had turned gray, spinning, the sky rumbling low and mean. The roar was louder now, closer. We reached the barn door just as the first sheets of hail hit the ground. Inside. I yelled. Sarah stumbled in. I turned, expecting Rocky to follow, but he didn't. He stood outside, looking straight at the storm as if standing guard. Come on, I shouted. But he stayed where he was, his dark shape framed against a wall of swirling gray. Then the sky dropped lower, and the wind screamed so loud I couldn't hear my own voice. The sound was like the earth itself was tearing apart. I pulled the heavy shelter door shut behind us and felt the pressure change, air sucked away, ears popping. Sarah was shaking, gripping my arm so tight her nails dug through my sleeve. The walls groaned as wind slammed against the barn. Above us, something massive struck the roof. Dust and hay rained down. For a few seconds the world went white with noise. I held her close and whispered, "It's going to pass. Just breathe." She nodded, tears cutting lines through the dirt on her face. We could hear the roar moving across the field, a monster circling, deciding where to land. Then, sudden silence. Too sudden. My breath caught. "It's right above us," I muttered. The floor trembled. Boards creaked. Somewhere, glass shattered. The air felt like it was being pulled upward, and my mind flashed to Rocky outside. I pictured him facing that darkness, refusing to move, trying to shield us. I pressed my hand to the metal door, whispering his name. "Hold on, boy." Minutes felt like hours. Then the pressure lifted. The wind shifted, fading from a scream to a sigh. Sarah looked at me wide-eyed. "Is it over?" "Maybe," I said. I waited another minute before pushing open the door. A blast of cold air hit us. The barn had lost half its roof. Shattered boards and twisted metal lay everywhere. But beyond the debris the sky was clearing, still gray but steady. I helped Sarah outside. She leaned on me, limping, her face pale. What had once been our front yard was now scattered with broken wood, shingles, and the remains of the old fence. "Oh my God," she whispered. "The house, gone. Just the foundation and a few standing beams." My throat went dry. "Mom?" I shouted. No answer. I grabbed my phone, still no signal. Then Sarah pointed toward the pasture. "Dad, look." Far across the wreckage, near the creek line, something dark moved. My heart jumped. I knew that shape. I started walking, fast, half dragging Sarah with me. Every few steps I called out, "Rocky." My voice cracked with each shout. When we reached the edge of the broken fence, I saw him. He was lying half in the mud, his side rising and falling in heavy breaths. One of his legs was bent wrong and blood streaked his shoulder. "Oh no, no," I said, running to him. "Rocky boy, I'm here." He opened one eye and let out a low, tired sound. Sarah knelt beside me, wincing at the movement. "He's alive," she whispered. I placed my hand on his head. You saved us, I said softly, voice breaking. You stayed out here for us. He blinked once, slow like he understood. The air around us was quiet again, the sky a soft gray. Only the faint rustle of wind moved through the ruined pasture. I sat in the mud beside him, rain dripping from my hair, my hands still shaking. Sarah leaned against what was left of the fence, clutching her side. Rocky's breathing was slow but steady. He turned his head slightly when I spoke, as if to say, I did what I had to. You crazy brave boy, I whispered. You stood between us and the storm. His ear twitched at the sound of my voice. I looked over the destruction around us. The barn roof gone, the trees stripped bare, and pieces of the house scattered across the field. The smell of wet earth mixed with splintered wood and the faint, sharp scent of metal. But in that mess, there was something almost peaceful about his stillness. He had done his part and now he just lay there, breathing, alive. Sarah touched my shoulder. Dad, he needs help. He's hurt bad. I nodded. I know. I'm calling Dr. Lopez. She was the only vet within 30 miles who handled cattle. My phone screen flickered. One tiny bar of signal appeared. I pressed the call button and prayed. The line crackled and then her voice came through, thin and distant. This is Dr. Lopez. Maria, it's Frank. My bull, he's down. He got caught in the tornado. He's breathing but one leg looks broken. Her tone changed instantly. Is it Thunder? Sorry, Rocky? The black one. Yes. The one who saved us. Please, I need you. I'm on my way, she said without hesitation. It'll take 20 minutes if the roads are clear. Thank you, I said, my voice breaking. After the call, I tried to make Rocky comfortable. I found a half-torn tarp and covered his back to keep the rain off. Sarah crouched beside him, brushing debris away from his face. He doesn't look angry now, she said softly. He looks calm. He's always been calm, I said, realizing how wrong I'd been all these years. I just never paid attention. Minutes passed in silence, the kind that comes only after disaster. Heavy, humbling, full of small sounds that make you realize you're still alive. Then, out of nowhere, Rocky lifted his head and looked toward the house, or what was left of it. His ears turned sharply. Sarah frowned. What's he looking at? I followed his gaze and froze. From behind the fallen beams came movement, a figure stumbling out, covered in dust. My heart stopped. Margaret, I shouted. My wife raised a trembling hand, coughing. I'm fine, she called weakly. The shelter held. Sarah burst into tears. Rocky let out one deep, low bellow, not frightened, not urgent, just full of life. It sounded almost like relief. Margaret limped toward us, covered in dust and ash, but her eyes alive. I ran to her, wrapping my arms around her like I hadn't seen her in years. She clung to me tightly, whispering, I thought the roof was going to come down. I prayed you were in the shelter. We were, I said, pulling back just enough to look at her. Rocky found Sarah. He wouldn't let me ignore him. Her brow furrowed. Found her? What do you mean? Before I could answer, she noticed Sarah leaning against the fence, her jeans torn, blood dried on her forehead. Sarah, she cried, hurrying over. Oh honey, you're hurt. I'm okay, Mom, Sarah said weakly, managing a small smile. Dad got me out. But he wouldn't have found me if it weren't for him. She pointed toward the bull. Margaret turned and gasped. Rocky lay half in the mud, chest rising slowly, his coat streaked with blood and dirt. Yet even in that broken state he looked proud. Oh, Frank, she said softly, hand over her mouth. He's still breathing. I called the vet, I told her. She's on her way. We sat together in the wreckage, the three of us silent, each watching Rocky as if afraid to look away. The sky was pale now, washed clean, streaked with gold light breaking through the clouds. The tornado had taken almost everything, but somehow left this moment untouched. A strange calm that made the sound of every breath, every heartbeat, feel louder than before. Rocky stirred, letting out a low groan. Margaret reached forward, resting her hand gently on his head. You saved them, didn't you? She whispered. You knew something was wrong. His ear flicked toward her voice. For a second it felt like he understood every word. Then, in the distance, we heard the faint rumble of an engine. That'll be Maria, I said, standing up, wiping the mud from my hands. A white truck appeared on the road, weaving slowly through fallen branches and debris. The vet climbed out, her coat already spattered with dirt, a large black case in hand. Show me, she said simply. No small talk, no shock, just quiet purpose. We led her to Rocky. She knelt beside him, running practiced hands over his leg, shoulder, and chest, checking pulse, eyes, breathing. Fractured leg. Deep cuts from flying debris, she murmured. He's lost blood, but he's strong. I swallowed hard. Can he make it? She looked up at me, her eyes steady. If he wants to live, yes. And from the sound of it, he's got a reason to. Sarah reached out and touched Rocky's nose. You saved me, she said softly. You really did. The bull's breathing hitched, then steadied again, a faint rumble that sounded almost like an answer. Dr. Lopez worked fast, her movements calm and steady even as the wind carried bits of ash through the air. She cleaned the wounds, stitched the gash on Rocky's shoulder, and wrapped his leg with practiced care. Every now and then, she'd glance at him with quiet disbelief, as if she was treating a creature she'd never truly understood until that moment. You know, she said, adjusting the bandage, I've heard stories about animals sensing danger, but I've never seen anything like this. You said he led you to your daughter? I nodded. He started acting strange almost an hour before the storm hit. He broke the fence, ran to the yard, and kept bellowing until I followed him. Then he led me straight to her truck in the ditch. Dr. Lopez paused, her hand resting on the bull's side. That's not panic. That's intention. Margaret folded her arms, watching with tired eyes. You mean he knew something was wrong? Maybe not the details, Dr. Lopez said. But animals sense things we can't: pressure, vibrations, electrical changes in the air. They read danger before it reaches us. What makes this rare is that he didn't just sense it. He tried to warn you. And when you didn't understand, he found a way to show you. Sarah wiped her face with the back of her hand. He kept turning back to us, over and over, like he was trying to talk. That's communication, the vet said quietly. Primitive but real. Most people would have ignored it. She glanced up at me. You didn't. I exhaled, the weight of that truth sinking in. I almost did, I admitted. If he hadn't broken the fence, I would have gone straight to the shelter. Dr. Lopez smiled faintly. Then he saved more than one life today. When she finished, she patted Rocky's neck gently. He'll need rest, antibiotics, and good feed. Keep him dry and still for a few days. Margaret brought an old quilt from the truck and spread it over him. The fabric looked small against his massive frame, but it made the scene feel softer somehow, like we were caring for a family member, not livestock. As the sun broke through the clouds, a golden beam stretched across the wrecked field, landing right on Rocky. He blinked against the light, breathing steady, calm. For the first time since the storm began, I felt something like peace. Sarah reached for my hand. Dad, she whispered, do you think he knew what he was doing? I looked at Rocky, the same bull who used to scare anyone who came near him, and said quietly, I think he knew enough to care. By evening, the sky had cleared completely. The air smelled of wet soil and broken wood, the kind of smell that only comes after everything's been torn apart and left bare. The farm looked nothing like it had that morning. Our barn roof was gone, trees were splintered, and the ground was littered with pieces of our lives. But in the middle of all that ruin lay a miracle. We were alive, and so was Rocky. Dr. Lopez had gone, leaving us with a list of instructions and a promise to check in the morning. Sarah sat beside the bull, wrapped in a blanket, watching him breathe. Margaret was trying to gather what few things had survived. A tin box of family photos, a lamp, and a cracked picture frame that somehow still held its glass. I stood near the pasture, staring at the empty space where our home once stood. The silence felt enormous. Margaret came up beside me. It's strange, she said quietly. Everything's gone, but it doesn't feel like we lost everything. I nodded slowly. Because we didn't. I turned to look at Rocky. He was resting now, eyes half closed, his breath steady. Every time he exhaled, it sounded like a sigh of relief. He's the reason we. That evening, the wind had finally gone quiet. The world outside looked bruised, gray clouds torn open, bits of hay and wood scattered across the fields. We moved Rocky into what was left of the old machinery shed, the only structure still standing strong enough to give him shelter. I set a lantern near his head, its glow catching the edges of his dark coat. He watched me, calm and alert, as if he understood this was a place made safe for him. Dr. Lopez had left an hour earlier, promising to return in the morning. Margaret and Sarah were inside the neighbor's house, cleaning up and trying to find food among what little had survived. I stayed with Rocky. Every time I thought of leaving, something inside me said no, like I owed him my company the way he had stayed for us. The quiet pressed around me, broken only by the soft sound of his breathing. I found myself talking without planning to. I was wrong about you, I said. I thought you were trouble. I kept you away from the herd because I didn't trust you. His ear flicked toward my voice. But you knew before I did. You saw what was coming. You even knew where Sarah was. I still don't know how. He exhaled heavily, the warm breath misting in the cool air. I took it as his answer. Outside, a flashlight beam flickered. Sarah hobbled toward us on her bandaged leg, a blanket around her shoulders. Couldn't sleep, she said softly. Mom's crying again. She'll be okay, I told her. She just keeps replaying it in her head. Sarah knelt beside Rocky, her hand trembling as she brushed his neck. He's beautiful, she said. All these years I was scared of him. He used to charge at the fence, remember? I nodded. He was never angry. He just didn't know how to say what he felt. She smiled faintly, then said something that stopped me cold. When I was trapped in the truck, I could hear something, like low thunder. I think it was him. I think he was calling for us. I stared at her, realizing the sound I'd ignored at first wasn't the wind at all. Maybe he was, I said quietly. For a long while we sat together, saying nothing. Rocky's breathing slowed, deep and even. I reached out and laid my hand on his massive shoulder. You did good, boy, I whispered. You brought my family back together. From the house, I could hear Margaret's voice faintly calling our names, soft and shaky, the sound of someone who finally believed they were safe. The storm had taken nearly everything we owned, but as I looked at Sarah beside me and Rocky resting peacefully, I realized we'd been left with what mattered most. By morning the world felt new again. The air was cool, the kind that smells like wet soil and leaves after a hard rain. Sunlight slipped through the broken boards of the shed, turning the dust into floating gold. Rocky stirred when I walked in with a pail of water and fresh hay. His leg was bound tight in Dr. Lopez's bandage, but his eyes were clearer, brighter. He watched me the whole time, quiet and aware. You made it through the night, I said, setting the bucket near him. Tough as old iron, aren't you? He made a low, steady sound in his chest, something between a sigh and a hum. I smiled without meaning to. You're welcome, I said. Sarah came limping in, balancing a cup of coffee. Mom's at the neighbors helping them clean up, she said. They said the news is already talking about the storm. She set the cup down beside me and looked at Rocky. He looks better today. He's a fighter, I said. Always was. Just took me too long to see what kind of fight was in him. She crouched down, resting her chin on her arms. You know what's strange? She said. He didn't just warn us. He waited for us. It's like he knew exactly what we'd do. I thought about that. Maybe he's been watching us longer than we've been watching him. A sound outside made us both look up, a car pulling into the drive. Dr. Lopez stepped out, carrying her kit. Morning, she said. How's my patient? Still breathing, I said. Still stubborn. She laughed softly. Good. That's what we want. She examined the stitches and checked his pulse. Healing clean, she said. He'll be sore, but he's going to be fine. Sarah let out a shaky breath. You mean he's really going to make it? Dr. Lopez smiled. Oh, he's tougher than half the ranchers I know. And judging from what I've heard, he's smarter too. I looked at her, surprised. What do you mean? Your neighbor Tom called, she said. Said people online are already sharing your story. Someone posted about how your bull warned the family before the tornado. It's spreading fast. Sarah's eyes widened. Our story? Dr. Lopez nodded. They're calling him the hero bull. Reporters want to talk to you. I told them to give it a day. You've got enough to handle. I looked at Rocky, still lying calm in the straw, sunlight shining across his scarred shoulder. The world could talk all it wanted. He didn't care about cameras or names. He'd done what he needed to do, and that was enough. Let them talk, I said quietly. He's earned every word. By that afternoon, the road leading to our place was full of cars. Neighbors, volunteers, even a local news van with a faded logo on the side. The sound of engines and voices echoed across the open fields that had been silent just a day before. Margaret stood on the porch of what was left of the house, trying to offer thanks to everyone who showed up with shovels, plywood, and casseroles. It felt strange, almost unreal, how fast people came when they heard the story. A reporter from Channel 7 approached me while I was stacking debris near the barn. Mr. Dawson, she said, holding a small microphone, we heard your bull, Rocky, saved your family's life during the storm. Can you tell us what happened? I wiped the sweat from my forehead. He started acting strange before the tornado, I said slowly. He broke through the fence, came running to the yard, and kept turning toward the road. He wouldn't stop until I followed him. That's how I found my daughter's truck in the ditch. She glanced at her cameraman, then back at me. You believe he was warning you? I looked toward the shed, where Rocky lay resting under the lantern light. "I don't believe," I said. "I know." The clip aired that night on the evening news. By morning it had been picked up by larger stations, then by national ones. They ran headlines that made me shake my head. "Hero bull saves family before tornado hits. Animals smarter than we think? The bull that listened to the wind." Sarah read them out loud from her phone, laughing softly. "Dad, he's famous." "He's just Rocky," I said, smiling despite myself. "He doesn't know what fame is." Still, letters began to arrive. Some emails, some handwritten. People from all over the country thanking us, telling us their own stories about dogs, horses, even birds who had warned them before storms or earthquakes. Some called it instinct. Others called it miracle. Dr. Lopez came back later that week with 2 animal behavior researchers from the university. They asked if they could study the Ring camera footage. I let them. They watched in silence as the screen showed exactly what I remembered: Rocky breaking through the fence, running to the yard, then pacing between the house and the road over and over like he was pointing. One of the professors leaned forward and said, "That's intentional. That's not random motion." Sarah looked at me, smiling through tears. "See? Even the scientists agree." But to me it didn't matter what they called it: instinct, science, miracle. The truth was simpler. You care. That night I walked back to the shed alone. The sky was calm again, painted in soft gold and blue. Rocky stood now, a little shaky but on his feet. When he saw me, he turned his head and our eyes met through the quiet. "Looks like the world finally knows who you are," I said. "But I always will remember who you were first. The bull everyone thought was mean, the one I almost sold." I reached up and rested a hand on his neck. "I'll never make that mistake again." He leaned his head slightly toward my arm, the same way he had the day of the storm. And in that moment, I knew no camera, no story, no broadcast could ever tell it the way I felt it. The silent bond between a man, his daughter, and the bull who refused to let them die. Weeks passed and slowly life began to take shape again. The fields turned green with new grass, and the smell of rain gave way to the scent of wildflowers growing where the barn once stood. We rebuilt little by little. Neighbors brought wood, friends brought tools, and strangers sent money through letters I never expected to read. The new barn stood taller, stronger, with a small plaque that Sarah insisted on hanging near the gate: "Rocky's Shelter." Rocky recovered faster than anyone thought he would. Each morning I found him waiting by the fence, steady and proud, a faint limp in his right leg but strength in every step. Sometimes he'd tilt his head toward the sky when the wind changed, as if listening again for something only he could hear. I never ignored it anymore. Whenever he grew restless, I'd stop what I was doing and look up too. One morning, a large envelope arrived from the university. Inside was a printed article with our names mentioned in the acknowledgments. Case study: Pre-storm behavioral patterns in cattle, evidence of interspecies communication. Dr. Lopez had written it with 2 professors, using Rocky's story as proof that animals might sense danger long before humans do. Sarah read it aloud, stumbling over the big words, then looked at me with a grin. "They're teaching about him in classes now. Rocky's helping people even when he's just standing in a field." I couldn't help but laugh softly. "That's more than I ever did for the world." "No," Margaret said from the porch, wiping her hands on a towel. "You listen when no one else would. That's what made the difference." That night, as the sun sank low, I sat on the fence watching Rocky graze in the golden light. He paused, turned his head toward me, and snorted softly, the way he did when he wanted attention. "You've changed everything, you know that?" I said. "People are listening now. Maybe not just to storms, but to the animals who've been trying to warn us all along." The air was quiet, calm in that rare way after the land has survived something terrible. Sarah and Margaret joined me on the fence, their faces peaceful for the first time in weeks. The house behind us gleamed with its new roof, the barn stood proud, and beyond it, Rocky's shadow stretched long and dark against the orange sky. For the first time, I didn't see him as an animal who needed taming. I saw him as part of us, the guardian who watched when no one else could. I whispered, mostly to myself, "Sometimes the best warning doesn't come from machines. It comes from hearts that still know how to listen." Rocky lifted his head toward the horizon, and the wind stirred just enough to make the grass bow around him, like even the earth was saying thank you. A year passed, and the story of that storm still followed us like a quiet echo. People stopped by the farm not to see the new barn or the rebuilt house, but to meet the bull who had sensed death before it came. School buses parked by the gate every few weeks, bringing children with notebooks and wide eyes. They stood at the fence, whispering to one another until one of them finally asked, "Can we see the hero bull?" I always smiled at that. He's not a hero, I'd say, though deep down I knew he was. He's just Rocky. The children would hold out apples and Rocky, gentle now in his old age, would take them carefully from their small hands. The same animal that once shook the fences now lowered his head for pats and smiles. I'd watch the way they looked at him, a mix of fear, wonder, and respect, and every time, I felt that quiet tug in my chest again. One afternoon, a young reporter came to do a follow-up interview. She wasn't like the others, no cameras, no rush. She carried a small notebook and a kind expression. "Mr. Dawson," she said, "a year later, what do you think Rocky was trying to tell you that day?" I thought about it for a long time before answering. Maybe he wasn't warning me about the storm at all. Maybe he was warning me about how blind I'd become. You live long enough with routine, you stop noticing the world talking to you. I looked toward the pasture, where Rocky stood near the fence, his scar catching the sunlight. "He made me listen again." She nodded slowly. "That's a beautiful answer." After she left, I walked out to the field. Rocky lifted his head as I approached, the same calm look in his eyes as the day I found him alive in the mud. "They still talk about you, boy," I said softly. "They think you're some kind of miracle." He huffed, brushing my sleeve with his nose, and I laughed. "Maybe you are." The sky above was wide and open, the kind of blue that feels endless. A hawk circled high above the ridge, and the wind carried the faint hum of life returning, crickets, distant tractors, the soft rustle of leaves. Sarah's voice called from the porch, "Dinner's ready, Dad." "Coming," I shouted back, giving Rocky one last pat. "Keep watch while I'm gone." He turned his head toward the horizon, silent but alert, like he understood the job wasn't finished. As I walked back toward the house, the memory of that day returned, not the fear or destruction, but the moment I realized that listening could save a life. Machines may warn us, forecasts may guide us, but sometimes the truest signal comes from the simplest heart. Moral lesson: never underestimate the quiet signs around you. Sometimes wisdom speaks in ways we don't expect, through instinct, loyalty, or love, and when we choose to listen, we not only survive, we understand.